Liberty and equality. Theories of distributive justice. What do we owe each other? What sorts of claims do we have against each other? When is ownership just? How should goods be distributed across a society? Distributive justice branches over to pattern theories. A theory is just when it follows just patterns. Distribute according to some criteria. Deserts, the desert theory. What do you deserve? Desert-based theory. Connected to meritocracy. Strict egalitarianism. Everybody should get the same stuff. The other kind of egalitarianism, no one should die in a gutter. Mitigated egalitarianism, no one should die in a gutter. The difference principle, this comes from John Rawls. John Hospers says he embraces the historical theory of distributive justice. This also goes along with Robert Nozick, Anarchy, State, and Utopia. All that matters is the history of a good. So if this checks out, it's okay to say something is mine. We'll be discussing political libertarianism, right to property. Hosper thinks is the most important right. His rights is logically fundamental. Without property, says the libertarian, no other rights are possible. How do you violate a right to property? By theft, tampering, smashing with a sledgehammer, giving it to someone else, redistribution. What are the government violations? When are taxes okay? What is the proper role of government? Protect citizens' rights from others, nefarious characters. This goes into the role of government, obviously. Should the government protect you from yourself? Hosper says government cannot protect you from yourself. Get citizens to help other citizens. Hosper says no to redistribution. Public projects, welfare, corporate welfare, are these things redistribution? Hosper calls this moral cannibalism. With stratification comes exploitation, the ability to dictate terms. Upcoming is John Rawls' method and conclusion. Poiman on affirmative action. Libertarianism equals property rights. Hosper considers transfers as a rights violation. Moving on to John Rawls, method is important to him. Rawls, this is the veil of ignorance. Rawls. Hospers says property rights, transfers are a rights violation. Rawls is the veils of ignorance, guys. Rawls says, by only voting on our own interests, that will make us blind to others and what is morally relevant. Once he applies this method, what does he come up with? Method control. You're going to get into... Okay. Why worry about the poor? Rawls says, who are you going to be when the veil lifts? Because when the veil lifts, it might be you who has nothing and in the gutter. Who are the poor? Rawls concludes, everyone has the same rights and privileges, equal opportunity. The difference principle. Inequalities are just only when they're to everyone's benefit. Libertarianism is way at the top for the rich. John Rawls is kind of in the middle. Zero is strict egalitarian. The benefits of Rawls is there's a safety nets. The problems are there's a rights violation and moral cannibalism. Opportunities for abuse in big government programs, distorted incentives for the rich, distorted incentives for the poor. Would you bother to try harder if you were given all your basics? What do you really want from behind the veil? not to be left completely destitute with an incentive structure to actually perform. Affirmative action continues. Would you approve of preferential selection policies from behind the veil of ignorance? How could you get helped? Get actively recruited by firms looking to diversify, access to otherwise inaccessible places, get advantage despite less experience. Low-income students get access to university. How could you get hurt? Not accepted into a program despite merit. You receive preferential treatment, but people resent you. Genuinely merit is a position, but lose respect. Less qualified people will be serving over you. Poyman says no to preferential treatment. It upsets meritocracy. Preferential selection just creates another marginalized group. Dan Hausman. Hausman says we are not militant about meritocracy. Veterans are given special treatment all the time. We should make sure they have a place. Hiring Anderson's daughter at a grocery store helps you keep an eye on her. But hiring a felon to give a second chance, Hausman is saying we don't always adhere to meritocracy. Would you approve of preferential selection policy from behind the veil? Yes, meritocracy is already upset. Tobias' equal rights argument. All inequality is due to unjust discrimination. That's ridiculous. Therefore, we should rectify unjust discrimination. 3, we should give preferential treatment until there's equality between groups. Hausman's yes for preferential selection can help provide equality of opportunity over a lifetime. Hosper and libertarianism. Hosper hates government intervention in general. This is the harm principle. So this gets into the work of John Stuart Mill and the harm principle. So this takes to position Mel does the opinion which it is attempted to suppress by authority may possibly be true. Those who desire to suppress it, of course, deny its truth, but they are not infallible. They have no authority to decide the question for all mankind and exclude every other person from the means of judging. Their certainty is not absolute certainty. So this gets into the harm principle. What then is the rightful limit to the sovereignty of the individual over himself? Where does the authority of society begin? This conduct consists first in not injury the interest of another, or rather certain interest which either by express legal provision or by tacit understanding ought to be considered as rights. Definite damage or definitive risk of damage. Private gambling is okay. Gambling house is not okay. Drunk in public, fine. Drunk on duty officer, not fine. All restraint on markets is a violation. So Hosper hates government intervention in general. That gets into the harm principle. Government must justly criminalize behavior only if blank, blank, blank. They must do so, but only to prevent harm to others. A person that likes liberty will like the harm principle versus paternalism. Government is your daddy. As the father, I will lay down the law. Government can play that role. Government may justly criminalize behavior. If you want to embrace the harm principle, you have to add another. Government may justly criminalize behavior only to prevent direct harm to others. Anti-drug laws. Why criminalize drugs? The harms to users. Physiology, lethal, psychological harm. You can lose yourself. Harms to sellers due to the illegal nature. Prison, fines. Harms to others, danger on the highway, close friends, family, kids, breakdown of society. Michael Huemer, he says arguments against personal consumption of drugs are weak. He gives a curious example of a guy named Howard. Howard is a loser. He sits around, couch potato, never works. He's a guy just taking up space should he go to prison. Huemer's response, Howardism should not be criminalized. The master principle, if being or doing X shouldn't be criminalized, neither should something else on the grounds that it could lead to X. Well, wait, drugs shouldn't be criminalized for these reasons? Huemer says if you're going to criminalize drug use, you are evil. We have a right to our own bodies. Therefore, drug criminalization is a rights violation. Anderson is going to give a parallel argument. We have a right to our property. Keeping my stuffs is an exercise of that right. Therefore, taxation for redistribution is a rights violation. Huemer, shoot up all you want, but if you're dying in a gutter, don't ask for any help. Once the public enters the space, they have a say in preventing addiction. We're looking on the liberty side right now, the liberty of thought and expression, the freedom of speech. This John Stuart Mill on free speech. What should be censored? Violence, sex, hateful slurs, threats, misinformation, AI, celeb porn. Mill says the only way you can know and get to the truth is to allow free speech. Here come the objections. What about obscenity? Mill has an optimistic view that the truth will win out. Will the truth really win out? MK Ultra, Phoenix Project. What about harmful speech? What constitutes suppression? Last lecture. Is there a moral truth worth discovering? Here's a view that there aren't any objective moral truths. Midgley doesn't like this idea and argues against it, trying out one's new sword. Tsushigiri. Samurai must be victorious. A good sword could chop a human from shoulder to opposite hip. How dare you, critics, cast aspersions on Japanese culture? Midgley uses a phrase called moral isolationism, opposed to the more used moral relativism. Relativism is a really slimy and slippery path. The truth of any moral claim is relative to the attitudes of a culture. Whatever thing is relative to what else other thing. If a culture approves of something, then it's okay. Why does Midgley call it isolationism? Because one thing considered right cannot be judged by a totally different culture. Moral objectivism states there are objective moral facts. Midgley says she's going to draw consequences of relativism. We can't judge other cultures, ethnocentrism. Other cultures can't judge us. We can't judge our own culture. You can't have any moral judgments at all. But what about tolerance? No, tolerance is not always good. So there is moral objectivism. The end.